establishing community-based conservation projects to maintaining parks and reserves. Keeping attuned to economic realities, they work to integrate the latest scientific findings into preservation efforts. Quarterly newsletters, annual reports, radio programs, media tours, and media coverage are a few ways by which conservation messages are communicated to the communities at the local, national, and international level. Media, considered the fourth pillar and watchdog of the society, have a major role to play in disseminating information regarding biodiversity conservation through campaigns, news stories, environment education for policymakers and the general public. Media has to build awareness in contributing data and in creating valuations of our scarce resources. In this constant race for being the first in reporting events without sometimes verifying the facts, the media has lost its priority of having any social responsibility of informing, educating, and entertaining in that order. Normally what happens is entertaining, informing, and educating. And educating, of course, is somehow forgotten most of the time. So actually the media has a very important role, and we should not forget that it has a very important role in educating, informing, and entertaining. That's in that order. I'm emphasizing that. Journalism on environment is the collection, verification, production, distribution, and exhibition of information regarding current events, trends, issues, and people that are associated with the non-human world with which humans necessarily interact. To be an environmental journalist, one must have an understanding of scientific language and practice, knowledge of historical environmental events, the ability to keep abreast of environment policy decisions and the work of environmental organizations, a general understanding of current environment concerns, and the ability to communicate all of that information to the public in such a way that it can be easily understood despite its complexity. Illegal mining issues, environment degradation, illegal constructions, protected forest areas, river diversions, dams, coal pollution, water contamination, etc. are currently on every newspaper, television news. But why only now? It's because suddenly everybody is waking up to this. Why not 10 years ago? Suppose we had started writing this 10 years ago. These questions may not have been asked today in this kind of a frantic and frantic manner. Maybe we could have prevented some major disasters. And again the question arises, for how long will there be follow-ups? Will these stories become only breaking news and forgotten till the next catastrophe? For this, total commitment is required on the part of the journalist. These are not just event-based reporting. It's a process, you have to follow it up. And it's not a day-to-day thing. You just don't write about it when something like a catastrophe takes place. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if you write from the heart, you will actually change things. It is not event-based writing, as I said, meaning that you write only when something sensational takes place. But writing on these issues is a process. What a journalist can do is not tell these stories in a scandalous and sensational way, but in a way that allows the audience to understand, sympathize, and learn from the experience of others. Basically, you have to create awareness about these issues. Because media is the only conduit that these people have for dissemination of information. And creating awareness is one of your major roles. WWF Nepal program organizes media trips for environment journalists. These media trips help journalists appreciate and thereby portray the real situation in the field. Media coverage motivates the people involved in conservation by recognizing their efforts and also reaches out to the general public who are keen to know more about conservation. Sometimes when choosing a career, one might think that environment journalism is not for all or not a very lucrative career. People normally go for politics or for sports journalism or maybe pastry or I think most everybody is going in for electronic journalism. And this kind of development issues are taking a back seat. But journalists need to pay more attention to these issues, and not sit in their comforts of their air-conditioned offices and get news to their informers rather than going to places where there is a lot of heat, insects, scarcity of hygienic food and water to collect this news. And that is what development journalists are all about. And this is part of development journalism, I would say, concern for the environment. You have to move out of the comfort of your office. You have to go to those mining areas You have to go into those forests, talk to the tribals who are really getting affected by it. People actually on the ground who are getting affected. Talk to them. Write about their concerns. Write a story with a human face. The human interest story also should always have a human face attached to it, not just facts and figures. Because when people, automatically connect, a reader connects to a name, to a person, not to just facts and numbers. We are not all economists sitting over here who are dealing in numbers. A journalist's basic role is to write on human interest stories when you're writing about even anything, even politics is human interest. Everything has a human interest angle to it. And that's what we are forgetting these days, I think. So, I just... But then there are many passionate types who would want to experience news first and then write about it. During this tsunami in Japan in 2011, many people who were on ground zero had started recording the wrath of nature through their video and camera-equipped mobile phones, the only gadget they could have probably carried as they tried to outrun the disaster. In that moment, the act of recording one of the most horrifying upheavals of nature was not done merely for posterity. It was the product of a citizen journalist at work, probably without these people knowing it. And as the biggest international breaking story of the year unfolded on March 11th, traditional news outlets, television, radio, and newspapers tried to feed the growing hunger for information of people across the globe. It took the following day, at least, for major international news organizations to send their reporters, cameramen, and production crew to the ground due to the disruption in transportation and destruction of road and rail networks. Let's come home to the tsunami which hit us in 2004 December in India itself. There was tremendous media coverage. I remember because I was collating the news to see how much of coverage was being given to that. And for the first 3-4 days, it was headline news, it was on page 1. But gradually, within a fortnight, the whole thing shifted to page 5 and 6, and slowly it just became a little column somewhere. And the amount of money which poured in for that disaster from all the international organizations like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank and the Clinton Organization and so there's so many organizations that poured in money. There was no social audit done by the media about that at all, because even after 6 months after the disaster, people were still living in those temporary shelters which were provided by the government at that time. What happened to all that money? Where did it go? This is the role of the media, to do a social audit, to find out when there are times of disaster, when that kind of money pours in. Do the people benefit from it or do they not? Because I did a series of seminars on that. I have an organization also, an NGO which I run on the side called Media Information and Communication Center of India, where at that time we had done a series of seminars on rehabilitation of these tsunami victims. What was happening to the rehabilitation process? And we realized nothing. In fact, there were some private bodies were doing more work over there. There were the spiritual organizations who had taken it up in a big way. But what happened to the money which came to the government? We don't know about it. Until today, there has been no social audit done on that. What happened? So that is where the media's role is so important in environment. Just to write, it's not only writing about it, it's also to create awareness about what happens after a disaster takes place. We want to know, everybody was glued to the TV for the first, I remember for the first few days. There was so much of coverage. And then suddenly, another story came up, something else came up, and the media lost interest, and there was no follow-up done. So this follow-up, this is a very important role. It's a very important. You have to carry a story to its logical conclusion. These are words which we have learned when I remember. I didn't go to any journalism school or something, but these are words which come automatically. You have to carry a story to its logical conclusion. You can't just leave it hanging. Because what happens to the reader? You're leaving the reader also just hanging in midair and not telling him the full story. It's like you go and watch a movie and you just come out halfway through. Suppose I take you to a movie and purposely make you walk out halfway through. How would you like that? You want to know what happens at the end. Everybody wants to know what happens at the end. Okay, so everybody is interested in knowing, is there a logical conclusion to this whole story? Did something really happen? Did those victims get what was due to them? Did they get their jobs back? Did they get some money as compensation? And what kind of money did they get? You know, when the Tehri Dam was being built, I took a group of journalists over there, and we were talking, and that whole Tehri village came underwater when this dam was being built, and there was a lot of opposition to it. I don't know how many of you were even born at that time, probably, but this was like about 15, more than 20 years ago. And Sundarlal Bahuguna, I remember, he was one of the activists who sat over there. His little cottage got swept away by the water, in fact, when the dam was being built. And we were talking to those victims, you know, those people who were asked to leave that town, and the kind of compensation they got from the government. It was amazing, and nobody was writing about it. People who have been living in Tehri town for 200-300 years, and they're suddenly overnight asked to leave, and the compensation they got from the government was something like 8 rupees, 50 rupees, because the government calculated on this thing, over your house is 200 years old, so you must have bought it for a couple of rupees or whatever at that time, so let's calculate, and at today's cost it comes to 8 rupees. They showed me checks, which we had all and that had a big impact actually also, you know, because then the rehabilitation policy came into being, and then people were given proper compensation. It is the media which plays a major role. If you don't write about it, then the government just sits and does what it feels like. I mean, you have to make the government aware of where they're going wrong and what should be done. So when we brought this to the notice, you know, that they're getting 8 rupees, 10 rupees, 50 rupees, there was a rethink about it, you know. And so I would just like to say that media has a very important role to play in all these issues. And we should not lose our priorities. And finally, we should write about what matters to people, and not just write about people who matter. And when I say people who matter, I mean actors and actresses and models and, well, you know, whoever is in the news lately. So let's write about what matters to people, instead of concentrating on people who matter. Thank you.
Good, very important points. Now I request as she has also, like Nandini, she was in the Ministry of Environment, she was in charge of this program, then she is the director now in Goa of those.
At the outset, I would like to once again also thank CMS Vatavaran for giving me an opportunity to be part of this media roundtable. Now, I should say that CMS Vatavaran Biodiversity Festival has come to Goa at a very apt time. At a time when Goa is trying to make a new beginning, to forge a balance between sustainable mining and the protection of livelihoods of people who live there. Goa is a land of bountiful natural resources, which is one of the reasons perhaps why we Goans are easygoing. As part of the Western Ghats, a biological hotspot, Goa has vast biological diversity. Forests cover more than 30% of Goa's land, as against the national average of 23%. Goa has very good infrastructure, offers a high quality of life, and is rated one of the most important or most progressive states of the Union of India. And environmental governance is an issue in Goa. The central and the state government have finally woken up to the fact that mining has not been carried out sustainably, that tourism has to be regulated more strictly, so as to balance the social and ecological costs vis-a-vis the revenues generated by these two industries. I would like to say that managing the environment development interface is a very difficult task. It is difficult because, especially in a country like India, where we have a strong democracy, where we have a vibrant market economy, where we have a strong and a robust press, you know, with full freedom. It's all the more difficult because in our federal setup, environment, land use, water use, all these are state subjects, and they run the risk of fracturing delicate center-state relations. Besides, in our administrative setup, you know, the functional responsibility for managing environment is distributed among several line ministries. You You will find a ministry for environment, you will find a ministry for water resources, you will find another ministry for transport, surface transport, water transport, energy. So all these ministries have different mandates, and coordination of these different mandates for environment protection is a real big issue. I have worked with the Ministry of Environment and Forest for 5 years as a Deputy Secretary handling international cooperation, media, and I have seen the Ministry of Environment and Forest really struggling to create policy space for environment. This was in 2004. Because handling the environment development interface, this conflict between environment and development is all the more difficult because we are having this notion in our mindset that there's always a trade-off between environment and development. If environment wins, development has to suffer. They always think that there is a trade-off. But that's not all true, because present momentum for green growth, green economics, has sought to decouple this environment development. They have sought to show that it is possible, it's a win-win situation. It's very much possible for you to protect your environment and also have economic development. You might not have great growth, but you certainly have economic development because green economy can produce jobs. In any case, today, environmental issues are no longer at the periphery of policy discourse. Today, environment occupies a central position because environment, whether it is climate change, the biodiversity destruction, all this is a public good. It's a public good across the globe, and therefore, environment policy is at the center of all policy discourse. Now, coming to the media, I am also an information person. As a fourth estate in a democracy, media plays a major role. There is no doubt about it in informing the public, molding public opinion, molding public perception, and thereby setting the national agenda. The centrality of media, why media has become so important, especially because of the high literacy rate. Most people are now reading newspapers. Also because of the information technology, through which your news programs can have such big impact. Then there is the social media, your Twitter, your Facebook, that is giving people a whole new avenue for expressing themselves, expressing their opinions, expressing their identity. However, with all this, media also has problems. You see, media is increasingly becoming reliant on advertisement as its main source of revenue. And because content is not much important for them, they are having a whole lot of ethical problems. You see, this conflict between advertisement and content is perennially going on with the media. The other problem with media is that media is a victim of structural biases. Our development process has its own structural inbuilt biases. For example, you see, development has always been more in the urban areas than in the rural areas. It's always been for industry rather than for agriculture. We all know that lots has to be done for agriculture and rural development. But in the context of the structural biases of our development process, what happens is that media, unfortunately, tends to go towards what is called as sunshine journalism. As the director already said, you see, sunshine journalism means they tend to focus on the enjoyable things of life. They tend to write on the high and the mighty, the bright, the bold and the beautiful. And what in this process of sunshine journalism, the basic role of media as the defender of the defenseless, the defender of the fatherless, the defender of the marginalized people takes a backseat. So in this kind of an atmosphere that media has these problems, environmental issues are trying to carve a niche for themselves, find a media space. Is it possible? You see, as the trend shows today, environment is hardly a frontline story. It will never be a front page story. Trends, some of the research that has been shows that environment has been reported consistently for less than 3 to 5% of all TV news. For the print media, It will hardly be a frontline story until and unless it's a story having big political economic content like the mining story in Goa. Otherwise it will not. That is the trend. Having said this, I also would like to say that in recent years, environmental issues are finding a place in media. This is because a lot of newspapers, a lot of news channels, the government, national and international NGOs have taken special initiatives to ensure that environment gets covered. You know, for example, before the Copenhagen summit, there was such a lot of spike in media coverage. Whenever the biodiversity, whenever these international negotiations, international conferences are taking place, there is a hike. Media spike is there, but then, as she said, it also goes down like this. What I would say, like this, a special challenge before the media is to ensure that environment reporting becomes an integral part of their daily reporting. Why do we just report environment as an event? Somebody means there is a disaster, there's a natural disaster, there's a flood, you say so many people are dead. So you are just covering as an event. Why not as a process? The challenge before the media is to make environment and climate change and biodiversity coverage as an integral part of media reporting, and not just as event reporting as is currently done.